would like to yield the floor to Joanna Brown, the coordinator in support of studies in TISA.
I haven't used this before, so okay. Hello. As we've been talking about, knowledge is power, and I'm here to provide you with a presentation that I actually just recently gave to my teachers at my school, and it is to empower you, to give you tools to be able to share this information with other people, and for you to dig deeper into the autism spectrum disorder. It is very thorough. It is kind of a standalone presentation, so I'm going to sort of give you a tour of it in a sense, so that you can try to, later on, go into it in detail, okay? So, first part, sorry, can I just do it this way? This first slide is just showing you all the amazing people throughout history who they believe and also have diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And they are the innovators of our species. So I'm just going to show you a quick portion to give you an idea of what this is. Actors, painters, businessmen, you name it. We need these people in our world. They're very important. And even the piece that is playing right now is written by a 17-year-old boy on the autism spectrum, and he's also performing. So you can always, begin if you're sharing this with people, begin it with that to show them, to give them an idea of where you're going. So again, this is for teachers. We try to stimulate what you already know. We want to show them that this is beneficial to them. This is a short clip from the movie Temple Grandin. I highly recommend watching this film, especially if you have a child on the spectrum, and or if you teach a child on the spectrum. It is extremely inspirational, and this particular clip shows you what it was like in the 50s for a parent to realize their child was on the spectrum. And it's an extremely powerful clip, and it's very important for you to reflect upon in terms of where we are now. We're so lucky that we're here now and that these kids have such a bright future, a lot of them. So then we get them to come up with their own definitions of autism. This is also an amazing animated clip discussing autism and how important it is to recognize that we are all different and we need these differences. We need these people and we need to help them so that they can reach their potential. And as special educators, that is our job. This is a fun we call them brain breaks, to get the teachers to have a moment to reset their brains, but also to show them one of the types of therapies for kids on the spectrum, and this is called primitive reflex integration exercises. And this is just one example that I do with my students. As you can see, this is called the starfish, and they pop out and they pull in, and you can get more into that a little bit later when we get to the therapies portion. So this is the deep part, okay? We're looking at what is the current definition of autism. It is a complicated syndrome, complicated being the key word, clinically characterized by language impairment, dysfunction, and social engagement, stereotypical movements, behaviors, and various cognitive deficits. It is the most genetically linked developmental disorder, and it is a brain disorder. So that's important because when we look at the full picture, we also look at the genes. But before we do that, it's important to know about Amy Klin. So this tells a little bit about who he is. He's super famous. He's an award-winning researcher. And what he is known for right now, or what his amazing feat right now, is that he's looking at when can we diagnose a child on the spectrum? How early can we do it? And we have the technology now to track the eye movements of children and to know what they are looking at second by second. And so with that, we can see a clear difference even at 2 months. So what he really wants to understand and what he really wants to communicate is, when do the genes then become symptoms? When does it happen? And so like I said, it can happen as early as 2 months. that we can see this. And how they do this is called your tunnel of, sorry, let me get to this. Your tunnel of focus, basically. And this is a little bit hard of an image to see, a little bit difficult. But in a normal child, they're watching a video. This was the research itself, and they're watching a video, and for neurotypical children, they are actually looking at the two kids inside the car playing and communicating, and that's where they focus their attention. But with the children on the spectrum, they're looking at the door of the handle, opening and closing. They're looking at an object, okay? So they can start to see, it's the eye movement and the tracking of the focus of attention that can diagnose a kid as early as 2 months old. And that is powerful information, and this is what you can see here. It's hard for me to even see right now. So the eye movements, there's a clear differentiation between the two. So his main thing, though, what he is trying to communicate is that the importance of this research is that autism begets autism. We are our own experiences. We are not just created from our genes. Our experiences create us too. And a child on the spectrum genetically will become more autistic if we do not help them early on. It is all about early intervention. So the genes are important. It is an important component of autism. Like I said, it's the most genetically linked disorder. But it's also about how we pull them back into our world. What are we doing to help them to achieve the milestones that they need to achieve so that they can progress as neurotypical people do, so that they can then reach their potential? So Wendy Chung is a brilliant geneticist, and this whole part of the presentation gets deep into the genetics. I can't really go into too deep detail about this, but what they have figured out so far is that 80% of the genes, or 80% of the children on the spectrum, it does come down to inherited genes. But there's another 20% that they're trying to understand where this comes from, and she gets into details about this. It is genetically, it's happening genetically, but it's through what they call de novo genetic changes. That means new genetic changes. And where that comes from is between every parent and every child, there are 100 to 150 gene mutations that occur. It's where they occur that makes the difference. And so what she gets into is the main genetic changes occur in about 400 genes. That's a lot of genes, though. So when these de novo changes happen, they're in these 400 genes. And those genes are so important because they are the genes that transcribe the proteins, that these specific proteins that she calls, they're sort of conductors of the orchestra. And they determine how everything runs in terms of protein transcription. And it's also linked, that previous slide was showing how it's linked to a lot of disorders. It's on these 400 genes, it's not just the autism spectrum disorder. These genes are critical. And this is her full talk that I actually got my research from. It's brilliant, I advise you to watch it. It is kind of dense in science, but it's worth the time. And her main focus is that she's trying to empower parents, so that if they've had a child on the spectrum, they want to know, or maybe they have a family member on the spectrum, they want to know, will I then have a child on the spectrum again? Or, my sister's on the spectrum, will I have a child on the spectrum because of this genetically linked situation? So that was the genetic level. Then we move into the molecular level. These genes are affecting certain molecules. And the main one is this one called mTOR. And I'm not going to get into all the details on this, but the important part is mTOR is responsible for something called autophagy. And autophagy is when our body basically cleans up our cells. And it makes us ready to continue to grow. So what's happening with kids on the spectrum is that they have an overabundance of mTOR. And mTOR basically halts the autophagy process. And why that is important, I'm just going to skip through this, is because when we are children, when we are in infancy, we have a period when we produce a ton of synapses. It's a part of our development in our brains. And what happens is that when there is an overabundance of mTOR in children on the spectrum, from that point on in a neurotypical child until late adolescence, we do something called prune the synapses. We clean them up through autophagy, okay? And so by late adolescence, we have pruned 50% of the synapses. But in a child on the spectrum, it's only 16%. It is a clear numerical difference, okay? So they have a difference in synapses. And you can see this here in the synaptic density. You can see in a neurotypical child at birth, at 6 years old, and then 14, you see the pruning happening. At 6, it's much more dense. And then at 14, it's even less dense, okay? But in autism, it stays the same. It reduces, but only 16%. So it looks very similar, okay? And you can even see on a specific synapse the same thing. So between the neurons, there will be a synapse, and even between each one, they will not be pruned. And you can see a clear difference between a neurotypical and an atypical. So this is a quick video about the excess of synapses in the brains, and that is what is happening, yeah. And that's a part of the brain, and that's another primitive exercise. So that moves into why we're doing it is about the milestones and getting these kids through the milestones so that then they can move forward in their lives. They always are on the spectrum, but if we can get them through those milestones, they can mature and grow and progress the way they need to be highly successful people. And this is a specific part of the milestones, and it's specific to a very important piece of the milestone that really helps to shape, if we can help kids to get through that particular milestone, they can progress more quickly on the spectrum. These are the important therapies, the most current therapies that we're using right now to help kids on the spectrum. If you are teaching kids on the spectrum or you're a parent, please take the time to look at these trainings. I have worked with STAR, DIR, floor-time approach, and I just recently purchased certs for our learning support department at TISA. And these trainings or these types of therapies for the kids are amazing, and it is listed sort of in order of, in terms of even historical background, all the way to more and more effective. Okay, so CERTS is right now considered the most effective therapy, but it is like a culmination of all the other therapies, so it's good to go back and look at them all as you move along. So please do share. I'm just gonna fast forward this go through it yourself, take the time to go through it. I want to give you the tools to be able to learn about this very, very interesting disorder, and not only that, the people on the spectrum are very important to us, and it is our responsibility to learn how to help them. So thank you very much.